Welcome to the Low Post, and no, I've not fallen and smacked my head. This is my post Brett Favre, Green Bay Packers.
And no, it's not Casual Friday either.
No, I'm just all sad. I'm just sad. Brett Favre, end of an era in Green Bay, folks. I've got the hat I got one of those free credit card things. If you fill out the wrong information, they still get compensated with commission. You get the free product. I had a hat to wear for Brett Favre going to the New York Jets. And, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let's start off with the stat of the week, though, which sort of sets right into our Brett Favre conversation. 253. What is that? That's the number of consecutive starts for Brett Favre. Mike, will that continue now he's with the New York Jets? Will he be starting week 1 for the Jets?
Yes.
Good.
He will.
Okay.
I think he will. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for them to acquire him and not have him start. Can you imagine the clamor in New York if they have Brett Favre in the team and Chad Pennington's the starting quarterback? I mean, geez, I don't know if that's going to fly.
All right, good move, bad move. Brett Favre being traded to the New York Jets.
I think it's a good move in the sense that the thing that we've talked about in recent weeks about reading the mood of the team and deciding is it really time to move on. I think in that sense it might be. Did they make the right deal is a much different question. And what do you think about that?
As somebody that's followed the Packers for the last 16 years, sort of probably joined them because of Brett Favre, enjoyed him, and then got enriched with the history of this team, the traditions. Love the town of Green Bay. I've been to 12 games at Lambeau Field, 23 Packer games since '97, thanks to Andy Amway and Bill Bowers and those guys.
Here we go.
Name dropping.
Hey.
Good move, bad move. It is. In the long run, probably a good move, but I don't think the Packers are even going to make the playoffs this year under Aaron Rodgers.
Wow.
They have 3 quarterbacks on their roster right now, Mike, that have started a collective 0 games.
Well, this is why I would think that it's not such a good move is because of that very fact.
Tampa Bay offered a 3rd round, I read, and a quarterback, Brian Greasy, a veteran quarterback. I thought any move you made, stop fooling around with division or conference. Maybe don't trade him to Minnesota, but just get the best deal you can. And I don't know if you needed to have draft picks. You needed a veteran quarterback to come back. You could have got one for this, and then you're set up. Okay, if you want to move on with Aaron Rodgers, and he does seem to have some good talent if he could stay healthy, then you bring in a veteran quarterback to back him up. You didn't do that in the offseason. You could have done it with this trade. Tampa Bay has 5 quarterbacks on roster. They're probably going to have to cut Phil Sims' boy. What's his name?
Chris Sims.
Mm-hmm. But they could have Brian Greasy. Is he the best quarterback in the world? No, but he's a veteran backup that really would have helped this club.
I think that's an excellent point, and that's 100% agreement with you about this, Starkey. They could have got a veteran backup quarterback out of this situation. They could have come out of this situation, I've got to believe, with a veteran backup quarterback, and they utterly failed to do so. Yeah. And now they're going, what if Aaron Rodgers gets hurt?
Then you're going to go with Brian Brom or the kid out of LSU that was the starter this year. I don't remember his name. He's a rookie also. 2 rookies are the backups right now.
Yeah, and the other thing that annoys me about this is this obsession with we don't want to trade him in the NFC or we don't want to trade him in the who cares? I find that to be an absurd. That's almost like they're it's almost like a fraternal thing where they don't want to send him to one of the competing families or something. I mean, please, let's be adults and be professional.
And I read before we went on the air, one of the stipulations in the trade was if the New York Jets would have turned around and traded him again to Minnesota, which is where Favre wanted to go, that the Jets would have to give up 3 number 1 picks to Green Bay in return. So,
I
crazy
suspect
is this?
It is crazy, and I suspect that if we knew all the minutia of the language of all of these NFL contracts and all of these agreements among teams about deals, as a fan of a team, you would want to jump off a bridge if you heard some of this kind of stuff. It's insanity, and it's like they're being little kids, and they don't want to. They're sticking their tongues at each other, and they don't want to give this. I don't like this guy. This guy's my rival, so I don't want to give him any sort of advantage in any way, even if it's a symbolic advantage. It's silly stuff.
It is silly, and I think it got to the point where even as a fan of Brett Favre and a fan of the Packers, I was ready for this to be over. And I think a lot of people...
I think America was ready for this to be over. I mean,
and we talked about it last week. Why didn't we say it on air? We thought it afterwards. Green Bay wanted to move on with Aaron Rodgers. Why didn't they just trade him before? He was retired. You had nothing in return when he retired.
Trade Favre before.
Trade Favre before.
In other words, the Packers were clearly willing to let Brett Favre retire with no compensation at all. And now he decides to come back, and now we're agonizing over. We don't want to trade him in the division. We don't. Oh, I mean,
yeah, make the best deal. You know, and again, I think the best deal would be to get a quarterback in return and maybe a draft pick. And as it is now, they're getting a conditional 4th-round pick. It could be a third. It's a 4th round. It could be a third if he plays 50% of the time, a second round if he plays 70% of the time, and a first round if he plays 80% of the time and gets the team to the Super Bowl. So you're looking at they probably could get a second round pick out of this.
They almost certainly could have done better if they would not have put the limitations on themselves. We don't want to go in the NFC. Yeah. We don't want to go in our division. That's where you can legitimately be very critical of the Packers.
And it seems like him and Ted Thompson, and they weren't talking here at the end at all. That's the general manager of the Packers. Ted Thompson, in the end, still got Favre because I don't think this is the best spot for Favre. You had looked up some stats on the Jets, didn't you, Mike?
Well, you wonder if Brett Favre is best served at this point in his career to be on a bad team. Jets were 4-12 last year, and on a bad offensive team. They were 26th in the league in yards per game, 25th in points per game, 25th in passing yards per game, and a team that wants to run the ball. This team's 2 wide receivers, number 1 and 2, are Lavernius Coles and a guy by the name of Jericho Crotchery, who actually had the better year last year. 80-some catches, had over 1,000 yards rushing, and 2 touchdowns.
Wow, 2.
I mean, now Coles had 6 touchdowns, but even that is a meager figure for a top line wide receiver. So this and also it's not the kind of offensive scheme that Favre is going to pick up quickly or be 100% comfortable with. So there's a lot of things about this that are I think red flags just from Brett Favre's point of view.
Speaking of red flags, our producer's waving. We're out of our time, but I am going to say one more thing. One of the things the Jets are selling them on is they have a new facility they're building in New Jersey. He can live in New Jersey, some farmland around there. Yeah, you're right. Here's the big thing.
Please.
4 good offensive linemen.
Well, that's
all
true.
4 number 1 draft picks, one of them being the former Steeler, Alan Faneca, coming over. So if anything, I think he's going to be protected. They've got 2 good running backs, Leon Washington and also Thomas Jones. But I also said, as I said to you, Mike, I don't think the Packers are going to make the playoffs. I don't think Favre's going to have a good year. 2 years ago, we were saying, 3 years ago, Favre had back-to-back bad years. Okay, people were crying for him to retire. Last year was a good year. That's why everybody's saying, well, he had a good year last year because his players around him matured and got the experience. His receivers really came into their own.
Sure.
He doesn't have those same type of receivers and same type of skilled players here in New York.
So what you're saying,
I think he's going to force things.
What you're saying, Starkey, is the way this has finally played out after all this angst is bad for the Packers and bad for Favre. That's your prediction.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Wonderful. It's a wonderful world.
It's a wonderful world. Let's move on with that. It's over now, finally.
There you go.
Aaron Rodgers, we already said
No, for the Aaron Rodgers.
It's like I was watching one of those shows where they just kept saying Brett Favre, even though they said they were moving on. The next question was Brett Favre again. College football. We're going to take off the hat. You tell me to take off the hat now.
Right.
Okay.
Doff the hat.
Take off the hat. Producer talking to us.
I think it's a good look.
Yeah. Now they have more of a glare on.
It makes you feel edgy and street.
Which is
good for you.
Yeah, I'm just back to my roots. As a ghetto gangster. But the glare wasn't as bad. I think I apologize to the viewers. College football. I apologize to viewers for watching this show.
Oh, come on. I'm not going to go that far.
Gosh.
All right.
College football. The polls came out last week, Mike. Georgia, number 1. I thought at the time, great move because I really liked their team last year. Thought they had a lot of good skilled players and they were back this year. I didn't object to it at all. What are your thoughts with who's number 1 and who's going to be there later in the year?
Well, I don't object to it too because you're right. Georgia was a very, very athletic team, and we kind of think. I think you kind of think of Georgia as slightly underachieving over the years. But Mark Richt, who is their coach, now in his 8th year, 72-19. That's not bad considering the league they're playing in, and they should be very, very good. Couple of provisos about Georgia. Number 1, 6 players currently suspended. They've had, if anything, more of in the last 6 months or so, more off the field shenanigans than a certain other program, which we're very familiar with. And the other thing that is scary about Georgia is their schedule. At Auburn, at LSU, at Florida, which is actually kind of a quasi-neutral field because they play it in Jacksonville, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party annual game. And also South Carolina, who some people who I like think is going to be very good. All of those games are on the road, and they're in the best league in the country without question. I think particularly so this year, the best league in the country. So I think they have a tough road to hoe. If I was going to pick one team to come out of the SEC, it would be Florida. Best player in the country, Tim Tebow, returning Heisman Trophy winner, and their schedule is much more favorable in terms of the home road stuff. Most of their toughies are at home, or as I said, this semi-neutral game in Jacksonville against Georgia. So they would be my pick out of the SEC. Now, it's a national picture, and there's certainly other teams that are in there.
Well, Florida's 5 right now, so that's actually a good position to move up as some of those top teams get knocked off to be in there. I'm looking at the middle. I'm looking at a 7 at Missouri, 8 at West Virginia, 9 at Clemson. Not as strong conferences. They might have one tough team in there. West Virginia could, I think they play Auburn, as you said, on a Thursday night coming up. But other than that, Mike, West Virginia, could pit you, as you said. Pittsburgh did beat them, but that's Big East is not that strong of a
two teams that I think have a real chance to be a national factor because of the leagues they're in. They're not in real good leagues. Are West Virginia and Clemson in the ACC. Now Clemson, a couple of toughies. Looking at their schedule. At Wake Forest, which has become a very good program in recent years, one of the best coaches in the country. At Florida State, who a lot of people think is ready to come back and be a little bit of a player. They also play South Carolina. And on this month, August 30th, season opener, when most of the national powers are playing, not even a JV team opponent, they're playing Alabama at Atlanta.
Wow!
So that's a legitimate game. So Clemson, a lot of pressure on Tommy Bowden, or Bobby Bowden's son, who's the coach. Yeah, a lot of pressure on him because he's been close and hasn't really closed the deal. Their schedule is a little tougher. West Virginia, I really don't see the Big East being very strong. They do have a Thursday game on ESPN, one of those Thursday night games, which are a lot of fun, at home against Auburn, and that's a huge one. And the other one for West Virginia to watch is at the end of the season, they're at home against South Florida, which a lot of people think is a real dark horse, a good program, a building program in that Big East. That's the last game of the season. It is at West Virginia, but those are two teams that I think, because of their league they're in, have a real shot to be a national player.
Because it'd be cold weather at the end of the year, I'd give West Virginia the advantage. If that was down South Florida with those athletes, maybe it makes a difference. That's an up-and-coming program as well.
Sure.
Quick question for you with college football. If you're in that bottom third of the top 25, which we do have a lot of Big Ten teams, including our own Penn State team at 22, Illinois at 19, Michigan at 24, do you still have a shot to win a national title if you're down that far, Mike?
You have less of a shot than you should. There's no question that it's a real disadvantage because the polls are a decisive factor, and if you win and somebody ranked ahead of you wins, you're not going to pass them. It's that simple. I will say that, however, that this is one good thing, semi-good thing, about the much reviled BCS, because since it gives pretty much credence to computer rankings, and since all of the computer rankings have a very, very extreme strength of schedule element and no factor at all on the past. It doesn't matter what you're ranked now. It doesn't matter. And we all know the rankings have a lot to do with the past. So there, you have a better shot with the BCS than you had with the traditional poll-only system.
Right.
But you're right. It's a tremendous disadvantage. There's no doubt about it.
I think in years past, Penn State would have been ranked higher, but just because of sort of a reputation of not coming through. They have a lot of players back this year, I guess what I'm trying to say. And I'm looking at 22 thinking, do they actually have a shot to get up there? Hopefully the BCS will come into play. But
they do. They play some of the people ahead of them. Ohio State and Illinois is another one that they play pretty early that they have a chance. I think they have a chance to beat. They have them here at Penn State. I think Penn State, 22 is a little low for Penn State.
Our last topic is the Olympics. It starts up this Friday. It'll be going on this weekend for 2 weeks. My question for you, Mike, this week is, what are you most anxious to watch with the Olympics?
Well, there's a lot of things about the fact that it's in China, which we are going to be talking about in future shows, which are really interesting and which really go beyond sports, which I am interested in. As far as the actual games and athletes, two things. Number one is Michael Phelps, trying to set this all-time record. He probably is the greatest swimmer who ever lived. He's an American. He's from down around Baltimore. Now trains in Michigan. And he's going to try to win. He's going to try to. He has a chance to win 8 Olympic gold medals, which is unprecedented. Mark Spitz, of course, famously won 7, right. and it's going to be a test of endurance as much as anything else, because for 4 or 5 days he's going to be doing nothing but maybe a couple media interviews, but other than that, just eating and sleeping and swimming, basically. It's going to be an incredible. You have the preliminaries and then the finals and the relay teams and all this stuff. It's going to be an incredible thing for him to try to achieve. And the other one is I'm really interested in the basketball. It just this whole sort of long-standing national team push that we're doing with Mike Krzyzewski and Jerry Colangelo running the thing, and great American players who have committed to it. I mean, most of the best players on the planet, supposedly anyway, are going to be on this American team, and if they're not going to win it this year, when are they? I guess is the question. Those are two things that I'm pretty excited.
Interesting with the basketball. I've seen a lot of neat shows they've put together, which is just sort of behind the scenes of putting this team together and stuff. It's been on NBA TV, a little bit on ESPN as well. These guys did not just commit for this summer. This has been like a 3-year commitment.
That's what I meant by the sort of standing national team.
It's like a team concept.
Yeah.
And there's almost like a junior varsity, and the Andre Iguodala's of the Sixers, and a bunch of your up-and-coming young players have scrimmaged with these guys, and almost like when these guys are done this year, these guys will slowly be moved in. So it's a really neat, almost organization that's been put in place, as opposed to grabbing 12 guys and putting them out there.
And it's such a dramatic change from the past. From the past, it was like once every 4 years they'd give the coaching thing to a great college coach. Yeah. It was almost like a lifetime achievement award. Yeah, Bobby Knight, Dean John Smith, et cetera, et cetera. And now it really is this standing, organized national team that plays in the World Championships of basketball and also in the Olympics, and I think it's a better model for the realities of international basketball as they are right now.
The sport I'm going to pick is softball, United States softball team. And I was thinking this as we made this topic up. This is the last year that the U.S. Will be able to compete in softball. They're doing away with it as an Olympic sport. I think they're doing it with baseball as well. But the baseball was more of I guess we'll go do this. We'll give up our players to do this. It was more of a. There
were more logistical problems with it in baseball.
Yeah, it was more chore for these players. The women's softball team wants to be there. They want to do this. And if you look at what women's softball has done for other countries, and even in this country, the last couple of years, the women have been dominant. U.S. women have been dominant, and they're starting to do clinics overseas and so forth. It's sort of how the U.S. men were when the NBA players started competing in the Olympics. Then all of a sudden, you had Dirk Nowitzki, you had all these other. Manu Ginobili, all these European players became very good because they watched what was happening in the Olympics.
And it's not just Gasol. You're exactly right. This is to say that essentially what's happening here is they're dropping softball because the Americans are too good.
Too good.
Think about how ridiculous that is in terms of the development of sports around the world. Basketball is a great point, but there's other. Did anybody ever, when the Italians were winning the bobsled every year, did anybody say, let's drop bobsled because or the Austrian skiers? I mean, it's.
I think it was the dominance, and also it was the United States that was doing. I
get
your point as well.
Maybe you're right,
but there was some spitefulness that it's the U.S. But I think of how it would elevate other people. So I'm going to watch these games and really enjoy it. And the U.S. should dominate again. But this is the last hurrah, and for a lot of these women, this is very tough for them. This is a sport they've played since, people that are watching it. You have girls that played this sport as youngsters all through high school and college. It's done for them after this. They have nothing else to look forward to.
It's a very good call, Starkey. I like your take on this one. I'm with you.
Thank you. Until next week, we're going to talk more Olympics next week. But until then, we will be talking Brett Favre. No, Brett Favre.
No, we're done. It's over. The jersey gets burned right after this.
I don't know about that. I burned my T.O. jersey a few years ago. I did.
Understandable.
Yes. Until next week, he's Mike Gross. I'm Eric Stark. And for our producer, Paul MacGyver France, we'll see you again from the Low Post.